joining us to begin our conversation on the correctional service reforms, let me first introduce Dr. Magdalene Ajani. She is the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Interior, and Chairman, Independent Investigative Panel on Alleged Corruption, Abuse of Power, Torture, Cruel, Inhuman, and Degrading Treatment against the Nigerian Correctional Service. Dr. Ajani, it's good to have you again in our studio.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and good morning, Nigerians.
All right, you're welcome. Also joining us here is Dr. Uju Agomo. She's the Secretary, Independent Investigative Panel on Alleged Corruption, Abuse of Power, Torture, Cruel, Inhuman, and Degrading Treatment against the Nigerian Correctional Service. So the Executive Director, Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, PROWA, a member, United Nations Subcommittee on Prevention of Torture, Executive Committee member, West African Regional Coordinator, African Security Sector Network. Madam, glad to have you again joining us for this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me, and good morning, Nigeria.
It's great to have you join us. And we have Dr. Ike Ezeogu, who is a member of the panel. You're welcome to Good Morning, Nigeria.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all.
And we also have Francis Enobere. He's the former National Public Relations Officer of the Nigerian Correctional Service. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank
you.
So let's kickstart our conversation now with the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Ajani. Dr. Ajani, having, listened to weeks, months of, testimonies, reviews, what would you say are the most striking, revelations or challenges that, the panel was able to discover?
Very interesting story. Watching the men and the women of the Nigerian Correctional Service render service in very challenging situations, extremely challenging situations. And the prisons in Nigeria are quite old, most of them over 30 years that they were built. And of course, maintenance is an issue now, and funding is a huge one. So within those circumstances, the men and the women of the Correctional Service are putting in their best.
Okay.
But it brings out the fact that as a government, we need to be a little bit more deliberate in what we do in supporting the Correctional Service to be able to render services to Nigerians in their custody and also have their welfare taken care of.
When you say a little bit more deliberate, can you further expatiate on that?
We need to fund, equip, tool, retool the officers in the Nigerian Correctional Service. It's something that Nigeria needs to take very, very seriously. Okay. Because if we want to address security and crime in the nation, then the Correctional Service should be put in the right position that it should be, because they are part of the component of justice in Nigeria, and we need to prioritize it.
Okay.
We need to prioritize it. Let's bring him, Dr. Uju, into this conversation now. You're part of the UN, and you've gone around prisons. You've been part of the panel, listening to people talking about their plights in the Nigerian Correctional Service. How did you feel listening to their stories compared to other countries where reforms have worked? How do you feel?
I wasn't surprised because it was things I knew before. But what came out very vividly is that the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019 have actually taken care of almost all the issues. But the inability to enable the implementation of that act well is the shocking part. Because there is absolutely no issue that the panel discussed. There's absolutely no challenges that the Correctional Service brought to our knowledge, including the various stakeholders, that you didn't see specific provisions of that act framed with the full intendment to address. But the question is, how are we then doing it? So it's one thing to make wonderful laws, transformative laws, but it's also another thing to have both the political will and enablement to resource it, both in terms of capacity, in terms of mechanisms to make it happen, and in terms of funds to make it happen. That was clear.
So in other words, it's the implementation that is the major bone of contention now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Ike, you're also part of the panel. Tell us your observation.
Yeah, it's not different from what my colleagues in the panel observed. Two principal things. One is funding, then the second one is operationalization. Because everything doesn't start and end with funding, but funding is a critical part of the challenge. And then we need to also look at the attitude of the workers, which will bring about training, retraining to reposition them to function better. But all of that boils down to funding.
Okay.
Because one, welfare for the officers is also a major issue. And when you have officers that are not properly motivated, it will also be difficult to get the best out of them.
Okay.
So it's about funding.
I'm not saying it's only about funding.
Okay.
Funding is a critical part of the issue.
Because Dr. Uju has mentioned implementation itself.
Yeah, but you need money to implement.
Yeah, you need money to
You also need money to, and you need other things, not just only money, as the point he's making.
Yeah, and she also mentioned the Correctional Service Act of 2019, which sort of changed the philosophy and operations of correctional services in Nigeria. So let me bring in Francis Onobere into this conversation now. What does this act provide for?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just like Dr. Uju mentioned, there is hardly any part of the challenges that the correctional service is passing through today that the Act has not covered. To be specific, you heard during the discussion sessions issues surrounding training of inmates, that is reformation, rehabilitation, and reintegration, is captured there in the Act, but you don't do some of these things with obsolete equipment. You also had the issue of conveying inmates to court as and when due. You need funding to, and it's captured in the Act, how inmates are supposed to be conveyed to court in a motorized manner to address the issue of insecurity and timely presentation of these inmates in court. It's captured in the Act. If you talk about the issue of overcrowding, it's also captured in the Act. If you look at Section 12 there, 12(2)(c), it talks specifically about the fate of those that have been condemned to death and have spent 10 years after having exhausted their windows of opportunity to what the chief judge should do. It's there in the Act. Overcrowded, when a particular custodial center is overshooting its capacity, what the controller should do is there in the Act. If you talk about female, the need to separate them, create different custodial centers to house them instead of the ones we have now, where we have wings of female inmates in a larger custodial center. Is there in the Act. Go to Section 34. It spells out how these these issues should be handled. If you talk about the non-custodial implementation of non-custodial measures designed to reduce the overcrowding that has become a harder problem, is there in the Act. But most of these things have not been implemented. And to be, again, you know, the Act, if you look at the objective of the Act, it spells out 4 basic things. Number 1, to ensure international best practices. Number 2, to promote the implementation of non-custodial measures. Then the third one is to promote rehabilitation, reformation, and reintegration. And then the last one is to ensure a structural framework to address the issue of pre-trial detainees.
Okay.
Is there in the Act?
I like the fact that you mentioned non-custodial measures such as parole, probation, and community service. So how widely, I'm bringing in Dr. Ajani into this conversation now, how widely are these being implemented? Because we know in other climes, parole, you have a parole officer that monitors what you do. The parole, usually you have a job when you come out, and it's being monitored also. So how is the implementation going to be like in Nigeria? Are we well equipped to do that? Dr. Ajani?
No. That's the...
But it's part of the Act, the provision of the
That's
Act.
a straight answer to, are we well equipped to do that? We are not well equipped to do that. But like I said, within the challenges and the conditions that the correctional service works, they still render some degree of service, which is not exactly what it should be. And these are the things that the lack of implementation of the Acts should be speaking to. And hopefully the reforms will be targeted to ensure that those things are implemented appropriately. But policies, reforms, acts do not turn out to be actionable without the necessary tools, which have to do with training and with funding. So when I use the word deliberate, it is something that Nigeria has to deliberately deal with.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ajani. Let's now begin to look at some of the issues that came up, during the sitting of the panel. For instance, the issue of corruption and abuse of power. Well, at the early sitting of the panel, the issue of this key came up, and so many other issues came up. So now, tell us, how widespread did the panel, find these issues to be? What can you tell us, Dr. Guma?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure you know that the panel, in addition to receiving complaints, in addition to having public sittings, also visited places of detention across the country. Yeah. And basically what was seen, and which had also been flagged, is that when you do not resource the correctional centers adequately, you find out that you are opening the door for illegal things to happen for it to sustain. So if you don't provide for enough funds to have vehicles, enough funds to fuel vehicles, inmates maybe be asked to get those monies. Inmates may be finding a way to fund the spaces they have to stay in terms of the nature of those spaces. Okay. Of course, you knew about the issue of overcrowding. So one of the key things we saw was, and by the way, let me repeat it because it looked like a lot of Nigerians did not believe the first report. You remember that the first report indicated that from all of the facts before us, that Bobrisky actually stayed inside the correctional centers. A lot of people, there's some people that sent me a message as Suju, if you were not in this panel, I would have said they bribed you to write this. Of course, there's no way we would have seen something else and said something else. But I will tell you specifically, the cell where he was, if I did not see it with my eyes, I would never have believed it was inside a custodial center. So privileges. So the question of the privileges, what happens in terms of privileges, whether these privileges and how people can access it, what are the things that make prone corruption, and how do you then ensure there is oversight to address those issues of corruption, the issues that the panel looked very closely into. The panel also decided to look at certain things that are supposed to make the facilities much, much easier. And I give you some few examples.
Okay.
Now, if you look at the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019, it recognizes the fact that you need to create enough work space for the inmates, and they need to have incentives for doing that. You remember the common saying that an idle man is a devil's workshop. So the 2019 Act says that profits from enterprises in custodial centers, be them vocational workshops or farm centers, should be divided into three. Before 2019 Act, it was a different practice. All the resources were sent straight to the Consolidated Revenue Fund, and that was final. But because that wasn't an incentive, the Act says let a proportion be put for the inmates that were part of this as part of their reformation and reintegration package. And then a proportion,
kind of an incentive,
and a proportion for the, like a revolving fund for that enterprise, and of course the third part to the federal government. So you find out that when this is not happening, you find out that the inmates will not be motivated to be creating, to be in those work areas.
Yeah.
And when this is happening, it means that inmates will begin to do other things to get money. So the whole notion of commercialization of the time and activities and all sorts of things happening. So basically what the panel began to see is that all of these things needs to happen. You need to be able to provide the proper resourcing and to be able to ensure that those workshops happen. There was a time where there was a specific policy, I think it's right sizing and downsizing, that took out a lot of the people who were working in those workshops. So many of those workshops don't have the kind of personnel that's supposed to train off.
So no capable hands too.
Yeah, because those ones were not the ones, they removed many of them. So we need to have a system, and which is part of the part what part is looking at. What are the things that can help address these issues? What are the things that can help deal with the cost implications? So in issues around female, he mentioned in section 34, we made provisions as to how to ensure that the problems they address. Issues relating to young offenders, section 35, we also looked at what can be done, issues about rehabilitation, and all through mentally ill persons, section 24, all of that. And I think that this was basically what is the key, and the need to have some form of oversight. Because no matter what you do, if you don't encourage a mechanism of internal and external oversight, you have a problem. And one of the things I believe Nigerians should celebrate is what the Minister of Interior is doing through this process of establishing this panel.
So what are those things then?
Clearly, what the minister have just done was to say, I am bringing my agency under me, under scrutiny. Let us see to what extent this agency is complying with that thing you see in the objective of the Act, which is section 2 sub 1A, which talks about complying with international best practices and good correctional practices. So now doing this and not interfering in any way, ensuring that people can bring complaints, ensuring that we can visit. Do you know when we visit custodial center, they don't know when we're coming. And we have vivid videos and pictures about everything. And then making sure that people are speaking to it.
When you don't know when you're coming, how do you have easy access to this?
We had complete cooperation and cooperation from the Controller General of Corrections and his team. They gave us access to everywhere we wanted. The interviews we had privately with inmates, even every information we're asking them we needed, they brought. They also brought the relevant departments and staff to all of our sessions. So if all the other ministries are doing something like that, maybe we will not be where we are. So again, if every agency needs to position itself to scrutiny, ensuring that both internal and external, as well as independent oversight mechanisms are put in place. That is how we can checkmate some of the ills in the society.
Indeed, that is how we can checkmate some of the ills in the society. And recently, Dr. Ike, the government recently released thousands of inmates So just to decongest, the facilities. Beyond periodic releases, what sustainable measures are being put in place? Because we've seen countries like Norway and the Netherlands reduce prison congestion towards non-custodial, sentences. So how can Nigeria, adopt or begin to adopt these approaches?
Okay, just like Dr. Uju said, everything is provided in the Act. And I believe the release you're talking about is the one that the Honorable Minister paid fines for inmates across the country. Yes. That's one aspect, but that is not even the sustainable part of it. The sustainable part of it is in the Act. There are certain visitations that the judiciary, the chief judge, the magistrates, and all of them supposed to be doing periodically to the correctional service, and then that is one of it. And then it's completely provided in the Act.
Okay, completely provided in the Act. And so if some people say it's 5 years too long to be talking about it now, because we've talked about implementation since 2019 when the Act came into place. Still, we are still talking about reforms in the prison. Why is that? Okay,
even though the Act was 2019, there are still some part of the Act that we are still not getting sufficient from what we found cooperation from the judiciary. For example, the Act provides that when the correctional facility is getting overcrowded, the in charge should be able to raise concerns about that, write to the controller, and controller will write to the various agencies or institutions that are involved in this, including the judiciary, and then they should be able to take action within a certain period. If that action is not taken, they can reject inmates. But we found in some places, for what we discovered in the visit, that even some of the judges, when they write, the judges say they don't know about it. When they reject inmates, the judges try to use all their political and then powers to force them to take those inmates. So which part of what we're looking at also is how to get inter-agency collaboration, get the agencies to understand this, the judiciary particularly to understand this part of the provisions and help in implementing. And correctional service does not operate in isolation. So nobody gets into correctional service without coming through the court. And without the cooperation of the court, I am not sure we will also get to successfully decongest.
Were they representatives from the judiciary as part of your panel?
Yes, we have some in the first and second public hearing, but in this one we have NBA, we have Lacon, and then the Spider. And Nigerian Bar Association.
All right, Dr. Ike, thank you so much for that. Let's come to Mr. Francis now. You've been the public relations officer at the Correctional Service. I mean, you were. All right, so you should be very familiar when we talk about the welfare and the working conditions of the correctional officers and how, it affects, their performance. And also, when you tell us that, also I want us to look at the issue of infrastructure now, the gaps in infrastructure. How does it affect, the performance of, the inmates and also the officers there?
Yes, talking about welfare of the personnel and their working environment, what they have to work with to deliver on the mandate. I just tell you straight away that it's nothing to write home about. To start with, except recently that through the Honorable Minister of Interior, there are moves now to increase the staffing. Before now, you find a situation where some of the personnel do 24 hours at a stretch due to inadequate personnel.
Okay.
And that, of course, what, to lead to work burnout, the efficiency will drop, the dedication will also drop, the material they have to work with to start with. Those in the workshop you have heard, there are obsolete equipment there, apart from the fact that the tradesmen are not even there. Are you talking about the barrack accommodation that should, at least if you leave your house in the morning, you are going to work, at least you should be sure that your family is kept in a safe and clean and decent environment. Go around the barracks. They are nothing to write them about. And even the offices, if you go outside the shores of these countries or some other clients that want to emulate, you go to their custodial facilities. Most of these things that we are manually handling, they've been digitized, and the logs and everything, you can see in one place. You are able to preview a large expanse of area where you are working without necessarily living where you are. You are able to tell what is happening in different bits. We don't have such around. And the surprising aspect of it is that some of these equipment, they are so little that it doesn't take rocket science to get them, installed. We have been stuck with this pittance, if I may use that language, of in terms of allocation to the service, because it's what you have, you work with. So we need to again celebrate, just like Dr. Yu said, celebrate the Honorable Minister of Interior. Yes, the challenges are huge, but what he has succeeded in doing with this exposure is to bring in different components of the society. Let people see areas they can be of help. The NME was there, the Nigerian Bar Association was there, the Nigerian Medical Association, they were there, and so many other components of society that participated. They will see areas they can come in to assist so that the burden on the federal government will be reduced. Because there's this saying that if a hunter shoots an animal that looks like a palm kernel, he faces the challenge of how to butcher it. Okay, you have this huge number of offenders in your custody. What next? Because every inmate has a date with the society. So if you don't capacitate the institution that is designed to take care of them to the extent that they are able to remodify their character and return them to society better citizens, then you will be cutting a set of human beings. You assemble in a place, you teach them higher forms of criminality, and then bring them back to society more venomous.
Bring them back to society more venomous. Now, despite reforms, Dr. Ajani, reports still, like you mentioned, highlights, overcrowding, malnutrition, and inadequate health care in correctional centers, where we bring people, our offenders, some are armed robbers, some just stole a chicken. And it's been there for the past 10 years because going to court is now an issue. So what was your assessment on ground when you went around these prisons? What was your assessment, and what did you take back to the panel for discussion on the table?
The assessments are this. More than 70% of inmates first are state offenders and are waiting trials. You just mentioned somebody stole chicken and is in custody for 10 years. Should that really be the right place for that person to be in? No. We have the non-custodial measures that should handle minor cases like that, but is the judges using that? No. Everybody is taken to the cell, and dates of going to courts are just endlessly postponed. Within the Act, there should be a system where the state judges go periodically to the cells to at least look at such cases and get them out. But this is not an active process in most of the states. Delta, maybe, is it Anambra or Enugu? Those ones tend to do it every quarter. But most times, even when the attention of the judges are drawn to the fact that there are non-custodial measures, it looks like we still have a lot of stakeholders' engagement and sensitization to do. Because this is an act of parliament. So, if anything, I expect the judges to know better than what we're experiencing. And when the custodian and the correctional officers try to bring this to their attention, even in courts, they are at the risk of being arrested. So, the correctional officers.
Contempt of court.
Yes, for contempt of court. So there are things that shouldn't just happen. 5 years after the existence of an act, people who should know are claiming that they do not know. This came up, we engaged the Judiciary Institute and the Council about it, and the need for them to do more sensitization of their judges. Because if they do this, and the state governors take responsibility for the state offenders, then in the first place we should not be talking about congestion of the prisons. Because more than 70% of people who are there should really not be there. Should really not be there. And so that will now give the judges and the correctional service officers better time to manage the few who are there because they have to be there.
Dr. Ajani, I still want to stay with you before I come to Dr. Ogoma here. Do you think the community-based initiative can also assist, in supporting the offenders?
Okay, I think I need to understand you better. What do you mean by that?
When I talk about community, I'm talking about the society now. Do you think the initiative can contribute to supporting the welfare of the offenders?
Oh, definitely. Let's take the health aspects, okay? Most of the correctional centers have clinics, but we don't have enough medical or health workers to attend to them.
Yeah.
Realize that these people are in a confined space. They have been sent to a place where they do not know what day and time they are going to come out or get justice. So psychologically, they are down. So for psychologists, therapists to come into work with these people is something that could be of great help.
Okay.
Even medications, we don't have enough. So pharmaceutical companies coming in to support with drugs as a form of CSR will definitely help. The Lagon, FIDA, the rest of them, there are quite a number of inmates who do not have access to lawyers. So the society coming in to participate in some of this will definitely boost the morale of both the staff and the inmates.
Okay.
And then they get the support for somebody who will speak for them or even assist in their health care. You have a lot of them with scabies. Drugs for scabies are things that can be provided so freely by pharmaceutical companies. But are these being done? No. No. Just trickles from faith-based organizations.
Are these part of your recommendations?
They will be part of our recommendations because at the 3 public hearings that we've heard, particularly the last one that had to do with thermal extensions, we had different groups represented, and these were presented to them, and quite a number of people actually got their eyes open. Like the first vice president of the Nigerian Medical Association that was in attendance, hearing that the inmates do not even have adequate sanitary pad for the ladies. At the end of the session that day, he called a friend who has a company who has promised to provide pads to inmates every month. So we have people coming in gradually, haven't seen what is going on in the prison, because the truth is that a lot of Nigerians do not even know what the correctional service staff and the inmates are going through. So we've had some promises coming in, and the fact that they will work with us going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pamsek. Okay, Dr. Ogoma.
We have to remind our viewers to send in their text messages and questions to our guests seated here in the studio. If you have any, please send them. Make it short and simple, please, and put your name at the end of your question to our guest in the studio. We'll be expecting your contributions as our viewers, yes.
All right. Okay. I was going to ask you, because earlier on we talked about some people that have been sentenced probably to death and all that, and the sentences have not been, executed. We know that some governors are always very afraid to say, no, I cannot sign for somebody to go and be executed and all that. In such instances, what do you think should be done? Beyond punishment, correctional facilities are meant to rehabilitate. How did the panel assess current rehabilitation programs? That is, plus the question I asked earlier.
Very, very valid question. But please do permit me to say something about non-custodial measures, because I think it is important to be said.
Very.
The whole of Part 2 of the Nigerian Correctional Service makes very copious provisions in terms of what needs to be done in terms of the implementation of non-custodial measures. Another term for it is community corrections. The same also for Section 2, Sub 1B of that same Act. From Section 37(1) of the Act, tells us the different types of non-custodial measures that the Nigerian Correctional Service is supposed to help in supervising. The issue about community service, probation, parole, restorative justice, and any other type. Now, part of the key issue, which is aligns to the point that the chairperson had mentioned, of the panel had mentioned, is the fact that when you don't have resources, from the information the panel has gotten, there's not been any single budgetary allocation for the implementation of non-custodial measures, for recruitment of staff to administer non-custodial supervision. So how are we going to be able to deal with that? Even though there are records that the Correctional Service sent to the panel that they have been, using designated staff and addressing. But you and I know that if they have proper resourcing and then there are adequate staff and around this, we would be able to achieve much. And once that is done, it will reduce the number of population. She mentioned, like the example that you gave about somebody stealing a chicken. There's no need keeping the person there, because when you do, you're exposing the person to become a criminal or a serious criminal rather than a minor offender, despite the fact that the government will be spending money on that. Now, I'll quickly go to the issue you raised. The first issue you raised is about the issue of dealing with the death row inmates. The point, it must be said, that currently there is a United Nations moratorium on executions. Okay. And part of the reason is that we have found that many a times there are errors. So what if you have wrongly accused someone? When the person is executed, it is final. You can't say, I'm sorry. It is gone. So, and that's why in many countries, death penalty has been abolished. Now, the major point here being said is, it is good that Nigeria continues to have a moratorium or toward the line that international compliance. So, but what happens is basically true. You have a process which is called the prerogative of mercy process. Remember, the prerogative of mercy, which is a constitutional provision, speaks both in terms of the federal offenses and state offenses. So either the president or the governor will need to sign. Now, for those who are of good behavior for some reasons, you can commute somebody's death sentence into life, okay? And that is the place for that administrative process in terms of the prerogative of mercy. But the other point is that in the Act, with that Section 12(2)(c) that Francis mentioned, you find a situation that when they have exhausted the appeal, right, and we have up to 10 years, something can then step in when the chief judge can do something about it. And at that, because they have exhausted that appeal process, so he will not be saying that he's also serving his own case. But what we found out is that managing death row inmates is very difficult. They want different meals, yeah? And if you say you won't give it, there's a lot of tension. Meanwhile, in terms of the allocation of feeding, there is no difference between their needs and any other one. And that becomes problematic. And I think there was a lot that needed to be said in terms of how then do we make sure that the kind of programming in terms of death row inmates are maintained, and that this administrative process, both in terms of prerogative of mercy and the full implementation of Section 12 sub 2C. You then also ask the issue about rehabilitation. I think it's a very important question. And rehabilitation is at the heart of everything that ought to happen in custody, irrespective of the nature of the person who is in custody. And I think many a times people need to understand that in custody, just like in all correctional centers in Nigeria, there are people who are innocent. And I think people need to know that, because sometimes they think, oh, everybody there is criminal. It's not true. There are people who are innocent. More so when you look at the proportion that have not been convicted. The records that you gave us mentioned 65. That range of 65% and sometimes 69 to 65, 69, 70% is the average for the whole country. There are custodial centers that proportion is as high as 97%, 87%, 90% of those who are in custody that have not been convicted. Tell me how the correctional service will be managing in terms of the regime for those ones. So, in terms of the rehabilitation, I say some people are innocent. Some are minor offenders. Then, of course, some are serious offenders. Irrespective of whoever did each of this happen, you need to be able to ensure that what system that you have for them, and what the panel did includes the following. One, there is a provision that talks about giving what is called certificates of good behavior, which the board, on the advice of the Controller General, needs to present, and there are benefits for having that good behavior. The panel asked the Correctional Service to bring a list of all those who have been given or recommended for this. And if that none has happened, why has it not happened? And our intention is that we want to activate this process. The second is, do you remember that point I made about the division, the funds, the issue about the funds, the profit divided into three. The panel also wants to know, correctional center by correctional center, what are the different vocational workshops and the different farm centers, facilities happening there, how many inmates are currently benefiting from that, and how many inmates have benefited from this division of profit, how many enterprises have benefited from the division of profit, and if it's not happening, why and what can be done to address it, and understanding what those gaps are. We also ask in terms of families, because in terms of rehabilitation, you require families. Think of it. In the educational sector, you know about Parent Teachers Association. Why do you have Parent Teachers Association? Because you recognize that the teachers alone cannot be the only one taking care of these so-called normal people in the educational sector. So why do we then dealing with inmates not understand the full impact of the family? So the panel asked that the Correctional Service will be able to indicate what kind of programs they have or they can plan towards this. What are the status of their visiting spaces? Do they have challenges? What are the resources they require to get the kind of program and facilities and space for family visits and to activate that element? You understand? Now, the panel also recognized that even if you talk about the division of resources, if it's 0, divide 0 by 3, it's still 0. So we need to find how to increase that money. So why is it that state governments or private sector or individuals cannot see the need to give contracts to produce things? Okay, say school uniforms, shoes, whatever it is.
Like they do in China.
Do you know in Kenya, the committee prison in Kenya provides all of the plate numbers that they use in the whole of Kenya. All. Okay? And here, you can see military boots, everything. The correctional service can get it. Private sector can even come in, look at the way to do that partnership, because there is a percentage that can be kept in the package of that percentage of the profit. Let me give you a little information. You know, in the 2019 Act, it says that money should be divided into three, the profit. Remember, on the 17th of March 2023, there was this placement of correctional service now in the concurrent legislative list, which means states should begin to administer and all of that. So some states have, following the modern state correctional service law, started establishing their state correctional service laws.
Okay.
Ebonyi was the first. And few weeks ago, Abia State, the governor of Abia State, signed the Abia State Correctional Service Law. One of the things in that Abia State Correctional Service Law is that that division should be 5, not just 4, and not just 3. Okay. So the other 2 is that the officer who is training inmates in those workshops should have a proportion. Then the correctional center, where this is, should also have something. That way, everybody's incentivized. Both the correctional service, the center, the officer, and inmates, and everyone. So rehabilitation must be comprehensive. It must deal with psychological, social, economic, and family, and also reintegration factor, to be able to happen. My final word around this issue of rehabilitation is, if you look at the parole, the concept of parole is the only non-custodial measures, or the only community correction methods that deals with people who have served time in custody. Parole is based on saying those who have been seen to be of good behavior and they have the potential of continuing being of good behavior outside, that they should serve the rest of their sentence in the community. And there are clear process. And I keep telling people, I'd rather people come out of custodial center through the pathway of parole rather than the other. Because this way, you have structured method of continuing supervising even in the community. So we are hoping that by the time the report comes, that the very comprehensive focus of the panel is given in this, that if it's fully implemented...
Do we have enough personnel or technology to be able to monitor those on parole?
No, the answer is no. But part of the issue is that also in terms of parole, first, even the answer, you asked about, do we have personnel for non-custodial? We've already told you that there is zero budget for them. So we need to ensure that we have the adequate staff. There are some staff, but these staff are designated. So they need to really recruit more staff to make sure that this happens. And then there are also key agencies that you can partner with. Okay. I wanted to tell you one thing to maybe make Nigerians see how serious this is. In all my visits in many custodial centers, and I have, as you know, been able to do at least visit custodial centers in more than 32 countries. The places you see the kind of thing we are seeing are correctional centers that are in countries coming out of conflict. The only place I will tell you in Africa that you will see that their facility is worse than Nigeria is places like Burundi, places like Democratic Republic of Congo. There is no country that is not in war that have the kind of situation, especially when you start looking at the number of which is why we must do something seriously about this.
And in addition to all of this also, we are looking at how we can also make the correctional service more resourceful. Okay. For example, the correctional service has farm centers, cumulatively over 5,000 hectares. Okay. And if they are put to proper use, there is no way Nigeria will begin to budget for feeding correctional service. In fact, there should be production that should feed them and also sell to the public. So all of that are the things we're looking at from the panel, not just talking about the fund not available, even though that also requires fund to activate it. But if it is activated and effectively put to use, give or take in the next 3-4 years, correctional service should start to feed itself and also have enough to sell to the public.
Okay. Yeah, correctional service, you talked about funds, but I need you to talk about manpower still, employment of more hands, yes, to be able to implement whatever outcome of the reform is there. So how can Nigeria, strengthen restorative justice to complement correctional services there? Okay. We need people on ground. We need boots on ground.
Yes. If you follow the trend, recently the portal was opened for employment for Ministry of Interior. The services are under Ministry of Interior, and Correctional Service is one of them. And then in the panel also, part of the directives given to the Correctional Services that they should be able to plan their manpower and ensure that in the recruitment process, that people, the hands that they require, both in the medical and the counseling and all the other sectors, are all employed in this process.
Because I asked this question because there are a lot of graduates who read social welfare.
Yes.
Out there just wasting.
That employment is
Yes.
one of it, and then volunteering. We also need to begin to reactivate the mechanism of volunteering, because most countries use that and they use them well. But I think something needs to be done about also creating incentives for that volunteering, which we will all look at together at the end of our sitting, so that we can build a system that can encourage volunteering and make it more productive.
Okay, all right.
So yes, indeed. You have some questions?
Yeah.
Yes, can we please take them? Because we're running out of time now.
They sent you some
No, I don't have.
No,
you have them.
About restorative justice.
Yes.
That's part of the non-custodial measure. So all of the recommendations of the panel in relation to that will address.
Okay, as we begin to wind up this conversation, Mr. Francis, let's just see how we can strike a balance now between discipline, security, and the humane treatment of inmates. How do you think we can strike a balance?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the starting point will be adequate capacity building, so that personnel will be able to differentiate between maintaining principled stand on how inmates under your care are to be treated. Your responsibility as the superintendent in charge of a section, in charge of a custodial center, in charge of workshop, or wherever you are placed. You should be able to identify when an inmate is going out of track, and then have the capacity, the training to rein him in. And in addition to that, I want to also encourage that the components of visitors, as spelled out in the Act, Section 21, is there boldly written, both the ex officio, the legislative oversight visitors, the custodial center visiting committee, and the voluntary visitors. They all have their different components. They can take their responsibilities a notch higher by increasing the frequency of visit to these centers. They will be able to identify where gaps exist, so that they put in place what can address the issue of gaps in oversight, whether coming from the part of the officer in charge of the custodial center as a whole or the command officer. The issue of indiscipline has resonated in some flashes of inmates escaping from lawful custody and all of that. So if these gaps are closed, I think we'll be able to maintain some level of sanity.
Okay, Dr. Ajani, let me come to you now.
Wait. We have some comments. Let me quickly read them so that Dr. Ajani can respond to them because of time. This one is from Abdulkadri Adebayo Ozijimo from Okene. It says, the statement on challenges in Interior Ministry and Correctional Service. The Interior Ministry and Correctional Service face significant challenges, primarily due to non-implementation of policies and corruption. As a concerned citizen, I urge the executive to address these issues and ensure effective enforcement of relevant acts. Transparency, accountability are crucial for meaningful reform. Mr. Kolawole from Ilorin says, what happened at the Nigerian prison is nothing to write home about. I had an experience last year at Kefi prison. I went to visit an inmate. Both officers and powerful inmates do POS in prisons. When we send 10,000 only, 5,000 will be given to inmates. Prisoners sleep on floor, no mattress, except for special inmates, as they have contact of inmates and officers. Now, this one is from Asha William from Benue State. It says, good morning. Nigeria Correctional Service needs holistic rehabilitation and construction of more facilities to avoid congestion and to maintain good feeding culture. My regards to everyone in the studio. The last one says, this one is from Akeju Olagbaju from Abuja. Say, I agree with Dr. Ajani that the presiding judges, in particular the magistrates, should practice non-custodial measures. In Yobe State, we have some inmates remanded for the inability to pay as low as 5K, that's 5,000 naira, for offense as first-time offenders. I remember we had to send some money to the registrar to facilitate their release. You want to respond to some of these comments?
Virtually every comment that have been sent in were things that we saw. So this is the reality of our correctional centers. In terms of corruption, wrong practices by officers and men of the correctional service, the ministry is not taking it lightly at all. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, quite a number of officers were demoted, sacked from the service, because it has to go through a process. And once the case is established, then judgments are given based on the provisions of the extant law. It's a pity, but this is truth about our correctional centers. And the ministry is deliberately trying to get things done in the right way. Thank God for the current Controller General of the Correctional Service, who is up to his game and has started a lot of process in terms of attitudinal change for staff that are working in the centers. And of course, we all know who the Honorable Minister of Interior is. So transparency, accountability is something we cannot afford to overlook. So we are doing what needs to be done to change the attitude of staff. Also, the panel is putting down everything that we have seen, even while waiting for reports to be submitted. We have engaged the correctional service to make sure that those ills that we have seen are being taken care of. The welfare department is one that I know we dealt with extensively at this last third hearing with the correctional service.
Okay, Dr. Jani, just sorry, we just have to interject you there because of our time. We have another discussion there. We do hope that when the report is being submitted, and we'll have you again so that you can tell us the content of your report and your findings and your recommendations. Dr. Mandalin Ajani is the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Interior, and Chairman, Independent Investigative Panel on Alleged Corruption, Abuse of Power, Torture, Cruel, Inhumane, and Degrading Treatment. Thank you so much, Ma, for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Nigerians.
Okay, Dr. Uju Agoma, Secretary, Independent Investigative Panel on Alleged Corruption, Abuse, Power, Torture, Cruel, Inhumane, Degrading, and many more. Thank you so much for your contribution this morning.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Also, I want to thank Dr. Ikechukwu Ezeugo, who is also a member of the Independent Investigative Panel on alleged corruption, abuse of power, and so many more. Thank you, Dr. Ugo, for coming again.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, our viewers and followers all over the world.
We hope you join them when they come for the presentation of the report as well.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Francis Nobore, thank you so much. Former National Public Relations Officer, Nigerian Correctional Service. Thank you for doing us in this.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
All right. All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll have the second conversation. Stay with us.